A man backs his trailer down the ramp on a Saturday morning, brand new used boat behind him, coffee still warm in the cup holder. He turns the key, and the powerhead lets go right there on the bunks. A connecting rod punches a hole clean through the block, oil and coolant running down the lower unit, and the whole thing is dead before the prop ever touched the water. He'd owned it 9 days. I've stood next to that exact failure, looking at the aluminum split open like a tin can, and watched a grown man go pale because he'd just figured out the $4,000 he saved buying. Private Party is now a $6,000 paperweight. That motor didn't die of old age. It died of a reputation he was never told about. And here's the part that should make you sit up. Right now, this weekend, you might be looking at one just like it on Marketplace, thinking you found the deal of the year. You didn't. You found a stranding. You found the kind of motor that quits 20 miles offshore with the kids aboard and the weather turning, and no amount of luck buys you back to the dock. I look at boats and motors for a living. Buyers hire me to crawl through a hull and find what's wrong before the money changes hands. And I'll tell you something. When the same motor blows up in this many transoms, it stops looking like bad luck and starts looking like a business model. Somebody bought a corner, and you inherited it. So stick with me, because I'm going to give you the 3 outboards I would never put my own money on, and the 4 I'd buy tomorrow and not lose a minute of sleep. The last one's the one nobody warned you about. I'm Sam Holloway. Let's get into it. Before I name a single name, one promise. This is opinion from one working surveyor, plus the real public record, and nothing fabricated. I don't make up recall numbers and I don't invent failure rates, because the people watching this know more about these motors than most dealers do. If I can't prove it, I'll tell you I can't. Fair enough? Good. Let's start with the worst. And number 3 is one that's going to make some of you angry, because somebody you trust swears by the old version. Worst, number 3. The old carbureted 2-stroke. I'm not talking about one brand here. I'm talking about a whole generation of motors. The 1980s and 90s carbureted 2-strokes, Johnson, Evinrude, the older Mercuries, the ones with no fuel injection and a carburetor full of tiny passages. Now, fairness first, because these motors earned their place in history. Light, simple, you could fix one with a screwdriver and a prayer in the middle of a lake, and for 40 years they pushed half the fishing boats in America. If you've got one that runs and you keep it running, I'm not here to take it from you. That's a real boat for a calm lake on a Sunday. But here's the failure. And it's not the motor's fault, it's the fuel we have now. Modern pump gas has ethanol in it. That Eaton you see on the sticker. And ethanol pulls water right out of the air, and it eats at the rubber and the old carburetor jets. The motor that ran perfect in 1994 sits all winter with today's fuel in it, and the carbs gum up solid. A carb rebuild on a 3-cylinder runs you a few $100s at a shop, call it $300 to $500, and on a lot of these it's all 3 carbs at once. Then you find the fuel lines are turning to mush, and then you find the power head's been running lean and scored a cylinder, and now you're into real money on a motor worth less than the repair. The money consequence is simple, and it's brutal. You can buy the boat for almost nothing, and that's the trap, because the motor will nickel and dime you into the ground, and you'll never get a dime of it back at resale. My verdict, only if. Only if it runs perfectly the day you see it. Only if you'll do your own carb work, and only if the price already assumes the motor is a throwaway. Otherwise, walk. Now, worst number 2, and this is the one I had completely backwards for years, so let me own that before I say a word against it. For a long time, I lumped every late 90s direct injection 2-stroke into the trash pile, and I was wrong about the engineering, and I'll explain why in a second when we get to the good news. But the one that genuinely earned the warning is the FICHT-era Evinrude and Johnson, roughly 1997 into the early 2000s. Here's the honest history, because this matters. OMC, the company that built Evinrude and Johnson, partnered with a German outfit called FICHT to bring direct fuel injection to market, and they rushed it. The early FICHT motors had real reliability problems, power head failures, and the recalls and the warranty claims that came with them helped drive OMC into bankruptcy. That's not my opinion, that's the public record. OMC filed Chapter 11 in 2000. The company that built the motor died partly because of the motor. Now, fairness, because this is important and most channels get it lazy. The technology itself wasn't evil, it was just released 3 years too early, and they fixed it. But you, the buyer in 2026, are looking at a 20-plus-year-old engine from a defunct era, and the failure mode is a powerhead that can let go with very little warning. A replacement powerhead, if you can even source one, runs you $3,000 and up, and on a motor this old, you're chasing parts through specialty sellers and forums. The money consequence is the worst kind. The boat looks like a steal, the hull might be beautiful, and the motor is a financial sinkhole bolted to the transom. My verdict: avoid. Not because the design can't run, some of them run fine, but because the downside is catastrophic and the parts trail is cold. Hold on, because worst number 1 is the one most folks have never heard the warning about, and it's the cheapest motor in the room. Worst number 1, the Force Outboard. If you came up boating in the 80s or 90s, you know the name. Force was the budget motor, the one that came hanging off the back of an entry-level boat package because it cost the builder almost nothing. And that's exactly the problem. Fairness, fast, because I try to give every motor its due. A Force that's been babied, runs, and costs you $200 on a little aluminum boat is not the end of the world. As a throwaway, kicker-style motor on a pond, fine. But this is a brand with a genuinely weak reputation across the trade, and there's a reason. Parts support is thin to non-existent. The build quality was never in the same county as Yamaha or Honda, and when one breaks, you very quickly discover that nobody wants to work on it, and the parts you need are out of production. I have watched a buyer pay more for a single Force ignition repair than the entire boat was worth, and then walk away from the whole rig because there was no second option. The money consequence is that a Force motor doesn't just cost you, it can poison the resale of the whole boat, because the next smart buyer runs the same math you should have run. My verdict: avoid, almost always. The only exception is a running one priced like the scrap it may soon become. Alright, that's the 3 I'd keep my wallet far away from. The old gummed-up carb 2-strokes on today's fuel, the FICHT-era Evinrude and Johnson with the cold parts trail, and the Force motor that nobody will service. Now let me earn back the goodwill, because this next part is the part you came for. The 4 I'd actually buy. And I want to say something first about how I know this, because I'm not a 60-year-old salt, and I'm not going to pretend to be. I'm 38. What I am is the man who gets paid to find the rot before you sign. I put my hands on these motors most weeks of the year. I'm not reading a brochure to you. I'm telling you what I keep finding on the stands. Hundreds of inspections deep. The man who taught me this trade, old Reuben Tarbox, learned it on wooden boats with a feeler gauge and a flashlight, and he used to say a good motor tells you it's good before you ever pull the cowling by the way it's been cared for. I carry that forward into every survey I do. So here's what I find, over and over, on the motors that don't break hearts. Best number 4, Tohatsu. And I lead with this one on purpose, because half of you have never run one, and the other half are nodding already. Tohatsu is the quiet one, a Japanese builder that's been making outboards a very long time. And here's a fact a lot of buyers don't know. For years, Tohatsu built motors that were sold under other famous badges too. The engineering is that well regarded. Fairness, and it's barely even a caveat. The dealer network is thinner than the big 3 in some parts of the country, so check that a shop near you can service one before you buy. That's the honest limit. But the motor itself is simple, tough, and honest, and in the smaller horsepowers especially, a Tohatsu is one of the best values on the water. The mechanism of why it lasts is exactly the boring stuff that matters. Good metallurgy in the powerhead, sane engineering, no clever shortcuts waiting to fail. My verdict: buy with confidence, especially if you want a reliable kicker or a small main motor and you don't need a dealer on every corner. Best number 3, Suzuki. Now, Suzuki doesn't get the glory that some brands do, And I think that's a mistake, because pound for pound, their four-strokes are some of the most reliable motors I inspect. Suzuki was early and serious about four-stroke outboard technology, and it shows in the ones that come across my stands, with high hours and clean bills of health. Fairness and honesty together here. I can't hand you a published, independent failure rate chart that says Suzuki beats Yamaha by some exact percent, because nobody publishes that number in a way you can trust, and anyone who quotes you a precise figure is making it up. What I can tell you is the pattern I see, week after week, across the boats I crawl through. Suzuki's run, and they keep running, and the owners who maintain them aren't the ones emailing me in a panic. The money consequence is the good kind. They tend to hold their value because the people who know, even if the badge isn't flashy. My verdict: buy. One of the most underrated motors on the market, and that often means a better price than the name brand next to it. Hold on, because the top two are the two I'd trust with my own family offshore, and number one is the one nobody warns you about for the right reasons. Best number two? Yamaha. There's a reason you see Yamaha on the back of so many serious fishing boats and center consoles, and it isn't marketing. The reputation is earned. Yamaha four-strokes have a deserved name for running thousands of hours with nothing more than basic maintenance, and when I climb into a boat with a well-kept Yamaha on the transom, my survey report usually gets a lot shorter. Fairness. Because even the best motor has a tell. Yamaha, like any outboard run in saltwater, will corrode if it's neglected. And there were specific year ranges and models on certain motors where owners reported corrosion issues, so you still inspect the individual motor. You don't just trust the badge. That's the whole point of a survey. But as a brand, as a bet, Yamaha is about as safe as it gets. The mechanism is consistency, decade after decade of refining the same proven design instead of chasing gimmicks, the money consequence. Yamaha holds resale value better than almost anything out there, which means you pay more going in and you get more coming out. My verdict: buy, and don't overthink it. This is the motor that outlasts the boat it's bolted to. And before I give you number one, here's the single most useful thing I can tell you in this whole video, and it applies to every motor I just named. The first thing I check on any used outboard, before the price, before the hours, before any of it, is the lower unit oil. You pull the drain plug down by the gear case, the part down by the prop, and you look at what comes out. If it's clean, that's a good sign. If it comes out milky, like coffee with cream, that means water is getting into the gear case, and that's a seal failure that turns into a destroyed lower unit if it's been run that way. The other one: change that water pump impeller. That little rubber pump should be replaced about once a year, or every 100 hours, and it's $100 and some job that a lot of owners skip. Skip it, the impeller fails, the motor overheats, and now you've warped the head and scored the cylinders, and that cheap little rubber part just cost you thousands. Old Ruben used to say the cheapest part on the motor is the one that sinks you, and he was right. Best number one: Honda. And I'll be honest about why, because the reason is also the one knock against it. Honda outboards are, in my experience and in their long-earned reputation, about as reliable and durable as an outboard gets. Honda has built four-strokes for a very long time, and the company stakes its name on engines that simply do not quit, and that DNA is right there on the transom. The ones I inspect tend to be clean, quiet, and unbothered by the hours. The fairness beat, which is also the limit. Hondas have historically been only four-stroke, which years ago made them heavier than a comparable two-stroke and a touch pricier up front, and some buyers held that against them. To me, that's a feature wearing a costume as a flaw, because the weight is iron in the right places and the price is the cost of a motor you don't have to think about. The mechanism is the same engineering culture that made their car engines famous, applied to saltwater. The money consequence is that, like Yamaha, a clean Honda holds its value and rewards the owner who kept the maintenance records. My verdict: buy. If you want the closest thing to a motor you bolt on and forget, this is my number one, and the people who own them tend to be quietly smug about it, and they've earned that too. So let me leave you with the whole map, because this is the part worth a screenshot. The three to walk away from: The old carbureted two-strokes that today's ethanol fuel chews up. The FICHT-era Evinrude and Johnson with the catastrophic downside and the cold parts trail. And remember the honest twist there. The brand later built the genuinely excellent E-TEC, and then BRP shut the whole Evinrude line down in 2020. So even a good E-TEC now comes with a real question about long-term parts and dealer support. And that's a true ownership risk you weigh. Not a knock on the engine. And the force motor that nobody will service. Then the four I'd put my own money on. Tohatsu, the quiet value. Suzuki, the underrated workhorse. Yamaha, the safe bet that holds its money. And Honda, the bolted-on and forget-it champion. Match the motor to how you actually boat. Get the individual motor surveyed before you sign. Pull that lower unit oil and look at it, and you will skip almost every heartbreak I get called out to inspect. Next time, I'm going to cut into the boats themselves, the 3 worst and 4 best hulls I see on the stands, and I'll show you what's really hiding inside a $50,000 transom. If this saved you even one bad weekend, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps. And tell me down in the comments, what's the worst motor you ever owned? The brand and the year. Because the old salts in this audience will set the record straight better than I ever could. Buy smart, stay afloat. I'm Sam Holloway. I'll see you back at the dock.